record it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to say officially, uh, welcome to your dog. Welcome to
Well,
the
maybe I should mute while you're talking. I think that I don't want my.
okay. Okay. So anyway, the topic is order, Seder, and I'm going to share with you um, this presentation so we can take a look at the things as well. Um, And I'm going to start this webinar out the way I start all of them, which is inviting you to share on our Chai Mitzvah Inspirational Facebook page. And I can send a link out in the follow-up email. And now let's look at our themes. This is very helpful when you're leading your group, and it's helpful in just organizing the knowledge and the talk. So the background of this is the Hebrew prayer book, as you might know, is called a Siddur, and the Passover Seder, they're both derived from the same Hebrew word that means order, Seder. So just as the prayer book contains a set order of worship, and the Passover Seder follows a set order of 15 steps, beginning with Kadesh, blessing over the wine, and concluding with Nirtzah, the concluding affirmation next year in Jerusalem, we take this time of year to think about order. So what does it mean to take this notion of order and apply it to the rest of our lives? The Mussar masters thought that this particular midah, order, is an essential tool for spiritual well-being. So we're going to discuss 5 Mussar texts that will help regarding structures of time and space in our lives, and also priorities, and how order can help us to focus on what's important in our life, on our priorities. So let's look at the theme. The first one, order, Seder, is an essential tool for spiritual well-being. And the next one, be neither overly rigid nor overly lax regarding structures of time and space in your life. So an interesting note, we're going to celebrate Purim soon, which is a holiday that celebrates chaos. Everything's upside down. We wear costumes. We're recommended to drink and make noise. But as we move from Purim to Passover, in addition to the Seder, we also focus on freedom. And as we're thinking about the role of order in our lives, let's also think about whether structure provides us with freedom. And we'll start by looking at the first text. And if you want to say anything, just jump in, just unmute yourself. Okay? Okay, so the first text, before you read it with your participants, discuss how order or disorder in the rest of your life affected their equanimity, if you did equanimity last time. Ask them whether after the last session on equanimity, if they started or deepened a meditation practice or regular practice of Shabbat. They have another kind of spiritual practice, such as contemplative walks or prayers or journaling. Do they have specific time and place to do these practices, or are they random? And that kind of goes also for exercise or anything that you build into your life. Some people, they do it the same time every day or the same time. And some people, they're not that kind of person. And you can see how that way that you deal with your structure, how that affects your equanimity, since we just talked about equanimity last time. For example, if you have to take the same medication every day, some people are real good, right? They'll just take it when they brush their teeth, or they'll take it when they eat their lunch or whatever. And some people, they just forget, they have trouble. And that's just, one of the ways that order can affect your life and your health and your organizational skills. So, but moving on to text 1, it says, first a person should put one's house in order, then one's town, and then the world. So let's think about what we can discern from this text. The first question is, Rabbi Salanter, by the way, who is the father of Mussar, you might already know that, what does he mean by putting one's house in order? Does it mean to prioritize? Does it mean to get rid of physical or spiritual clutter? Please jump in if you would like. What do you think? Maybe I can.
I would say it's kind of a mixture of both, because I think that when you have order within your inside world, you tend to have more order in your outside world, and vice versa. Uh, I'm speaking from experience because what I do for a living, I'm a professional organizer.
No
So
way.
I get it with making sure that you have some type of order within your life, and you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of anything else.
And that's interesting because that's what this text says. First, put your own house in order, then your town, and then the world. And it's very interesting that you said that. I'm sure there are a lot of people who could use your services because I also
Mhm.
think order is super important. But when you said the thing about structure from the outside as well as from the inside, that really struck a chord in me because I think that that's true in, and now that you have a new baby too, in raising children, you put the baby on a schedule, not a rigid schedule, but you try to, have naps a certain amount of time apart, a certain time each day. And I think that that is like really, because I just spent time with my grandchild and my daughter. And if you want to feel any kind of um, security, I think you need some kind of structure. And I think order is that structure.
Mhm.
So I agree with you very much. Um, and then this leads us to think about the hierarchy of priorities in our own life. Like, how do you prioritize? Is there an activity you might want to do with your participants when you do this that might help them prioritize? And we can talk about it later. It's really nice. It has to do with the string of pearls, and I love it. We'll talk about it later. Um, and I think it's important to do that. And I think your group is so lucky that you're going to be teaching them because order is so important and you know about it. Um, you might also remember that Rabbi Salanter was a person responsible for creating the Mussar movement in the 19th century. And for many years, Mussar has been a way of putting not just one's own house, but the world in order. So while I may need more equanimity or more patience or generosity in my life, the world might also need these same traits. And it's a good opportunity to do some tikkun olam, and we can talk about that later in the webinar also about how this particular topic can lead to tikkun olam. So let's go look at the next text. And this is the one I was talking about that I love so much. This is from Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe. I'll give you a little background about him. Um, he was a Haredi rabbi born in Berlin in 1914. He was raised in a secular home and became a Baal Tshuva while he was studying at the University of Berlin, where he attended school in the 1930s, from 30 to 33. He's best known as the author of Ale Shur, which is a Mussar classic discussing character growth. And he died in Jerusalem in 2005. So he's kind of current. He published his first volume of Ale Shur in 1966, and that contains his Mussar ethics, his analysis on the proper regimented life of a yeshiva student, which of course carries over into our lives too. And the second volume was published 20 years after the first, and it was a glimpse into workshops he did for developing the elevated character traits. And the book that he wrote, Ale Shur, contains step-by-step instructions and specific exercises. So Rabbi Wolbe puts much emphasis on Seder, or having a schedule in order to fully utilize your capabilities. And I think that that's probably true, and it's probably something that we've tried to instill in our own lives. And he devotes a whole section in each volume of Ale Shur to the topic of order. He believes that students shouldn't rely on habit or on emotions. They should structure their lives. He said the greater the person is, the more organized is his life. So in Ale Shur Volume 2, he presents the core of his method. He calls it hitamlut, teaching oneself. It's teaching yourself, but it's like a non-ego learning from things. What he means is you study, you contemplate nature, you contemplate your surroundings, political events, your home life, and you learn from that. And it kind of reminds me of a Babylonian Talmud quote that was in the first session where we were learning about wisdom or chokhmah. There's nothing in creation that one cannot learn from, because that is why the Blessed Holy One created so many things. As our sages already said, and this is the text, even if the Torah had not been given, we would nonetheless have learned modesty from the cat, and that stealing is objectionable from the ant, and fidelity from the dove, and appeasement in marriage from the rooster. In this way, we learn something from all living things. And Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe continues, a yeshiva is a place where one learns to live, not just to learn. One cannot learn Torah with bad character traits such as hate, competition, or jealousy. So that's the context behind this. And I think we can even apply this to our own lives, where we live and how we interact with our neighbors and how we organize ourselves. I find myself quoting this all the time because some of the things I'm doing require that I work with organized people. And I have some people I work with that are super talented, but they don't have that clasp on their pearls, and it's challenging. So picture a pearl necklace with a small clasp. Which is more essential, the clasp or the pearls? At first glance, the pearls are more essential. But without the clasp, all the pearls would scatter, and all that would be left is a chain. Thus, the clasp seems more essential. A person is like a collection of pearls, full of potential, talents, character traits, and virtues. Seder is similar to the clasp on the necklace. Without Seder, all one's virtues and talents scatter, and one is left empty. I find myself thinking about this so often. But another thing also, because I work with kids sometimes, and it's important to have structure, but I think that not everyone needs the same clasp. There are different people have different needs or levels of organization. And I think that's a good topic of discussion in relation to order. The goal is to find a method that feels right and works for you. But some questions that this brings up, what does he mean when he says that without Seder, all one's virtues and talents scatter and one is left empty? Like, how can we apply this to our lives?
No, I would say that part of figuring out purpose and priorities is gathering everything. And I think that having everything together, you need something to kind of keep it glued together, which would be the clasp.
That makes good sense. That's right. So you really need both. And your pearls are the things that you're thinking about gathering together. And they can be different for each person, just like the clasp can be. You might have talents in math, or you might have a talent in art, or you might have talent in both. Maybe you're good at speaking with people. Maybe you're good at singing. And there are all kinds of things. And I think the clasp is also how you can make these things useful in the world. Like we're talking about ourselves and then our town and then the world. And I think that can apply to this too.
It's like a guide. You can have all the talents in the world, but if you don't have any guidance in how to use those talents and to kind of hone in on what the best way of using your pearls.
A very good point. And that kind of leads me to the next question. So what is the Seder, the order, the clasp in your life that keeps your talents from scattering?
I think it's the people I surround myself with. They're my order. They keep me in line, I guess, in regards to, prioritizing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, so as I was saying, different kinds of clasps, different kinds of people. I'm like a type A, and I wake up in the morning with a list. I'm like not out of bed yet, and I know. But my husband's just the opposite. I'll say, "What are you doing today?" And he'll say, "I'm going to have coffee," and I'll figure it out. So different, and I may be that person that organizes him. Different people have different things that organize them, I think that's a very good point. And also, I'm sure you've raised kids, you deal with children, and they need that structure, and they need to learn how to, to do it for themselves. So I always find myself quoting this. I love the clasp and the pearls.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Let's look at text 3, which is also from the same Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe. And let's see how it relates. It's really long, but I'll read it and I think it'll help. The order in a larger universe testifies to the wisdom of the Creator. As it is written, God founded the earth with wisdom, set the heavens with understanding, and broke open the depths with knowing. Similarly, in our own personal lives, to set up a Seder, an order in our own lives that will last, we need to use wisdom, understanding, and knowing. We need to ask ourselves, what is it that I really want to achieve in my work or my spiritual practice? When this is clear to us, we then ask, what can I do now, given my resources, to move forward towards achieving this goal? We need to be very thoughtful about these two questions. It is crucial not to ask too much of ourselves, but we should also not ask too little. Our Seder must always include enough sleep, food, and other essentials. He was clearly working with students. The first step in this practice is to meditate on the question, what do I want? Then we need to ask, what can I do now, given my resources, to achieve this? From this, one can build a daily and weekly order. I think that's so wise. So the idea is to think about what we're trying to achieve. He's reminding us that everything is spiritual work. Even seemingly mundane aspects of our lives can really be spiritual work. So, and look at the parallel. What is the parallel that he's making between God and us? He says, God founded the earth with wisdom, set the heavens with understanding, and broke open the depths with knowing. And we need to also set up an order in our lives that will last. We need wisdom, understanding, and knowing. So that's the parallel: wisdom, understanding, and knowing. So it's interesting. He goes from that to talking about something that sounds really mundane, like sleep and food. But that's something else to help us get ourselves organized. How do you think that? I see you have a cat also.
Yes.
Love it. How do you organize your own life? I mean, do you feel that you're doing a good job? Do you see a difference when you have enough sleep? Are you able to do that? Do you have and you can ask your participants, do you have a practice every day of meditating or a spiritual practice? And how does that order in your life affect your spirit?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting thing to think about. Okay, and so the other thing I was thinking about with the differences in clasps, think of a type, what we all know, a type A person is very driven, aggressive, ambitious. And then there's a type B person who is not very celebrated, or it's not easy for that person to get along in our world today as much. How do you think this advice would affect that person?
Well, I think, I think type A people, which I happen to be, well, I'm trying not to be as much of a type A, but type A's, I think they naturally gravitate towards order in order to be able to accomplish what they do. And I think that a type B, it may be frustrating, but they know in order for them to be able to create the order and the routine and, being able to accomplish whatever it is, that they need to force themselves into coming up with these habits of creating this order in order to be able to accomplish the same thing as a type A. It just may be a little, it's not quite as direct route with a type B personality.
Direct route is a really good way of putting it. And I think that when Mussar rabbis suggest a daily meditation or daily spiritual practice, I think that's really good for both types of personality, because it for type A, it gives you some spiritual in your life that you might be missing because you're always checking off your list. Mm-hmm. And for type B, it may be a more natural thing to think that way, but you're also getting some structure because you're doing it daily. So I think it's very interesting. Yeah. Okay. look at the next text, which is one of my favorite in the world. It's from the book of Ecclesiastes, which is often attributed to King Solomon. It was written about 450 to 180 BCE, and it's part of the genre of wisdom literature. The book of Ecclesiastes is concerned with the purpose and the values of human life. The text is, "There is a time for everything." And it's a famous quote, was made popular in a song by Peter, Paul, and Mary, "Turn, turn, turn," or "For My Time, the Birds did it." And I will send out a link, actually, because you might want to play it for your group. Could be interesting. So I'll play. And so it tells us that life is really a matter of timing. What does it mean that there's a proper time for everything? One of the things that can help answer this question is, if you look back at your life in the past year, how would you complete the phrase "a time for"? Like, what significant life events or passages have occurred for you over the past year?
Well, this year has been a significantly challenging year for me in many ways. So I would say that I struggle a bit with the whole "there's a time for everything," because I kind of feel like I got it all mashed into one year. So, that's, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not in quite the right mindset to answer it in a way that I probably would answer it differently if it would have been a year ago.
So it's interesting that you say that, not even knowing what the challenges are, but knowing what it is to have challenges. I think you need things to get you through them, and different people can get through them different ways. I think knowing that there's a time for everything, meaning that everything happens in its time, even if it's not the time that we want it to happen in, also lets us know that things will continue to progress. And hopefully we can have an optimistic attitude. And we can't always do that because we don't know what the future is, but knowing that everything happens in its time, at least, is a structure that, for me, lets me appreciate the good that happens and know that the bad will hopefully pass and maybe be a catalyst for something good to happen after.
Sure.
So that's hopefully a way of looking through it. One of the discussion questions that's suggested after you read this with your group is, how do you see recent changes in light of this verse? So, I mean, I know that you're a recent grandma, and so am I. So, I mean, and that's a positive thing, and that's a nice thing to see. And hopefully it has come in the right time for when you want it to be. And I guess also we might say that we're not the ones who figure out when the time is right, clearly. And we need to make it right in some way with our attitude.
Sure.
Yeah. Sometimes it's really hard to imagine that you will come out on the other side of a challenge. Really hard. And you don't know how long it's going to be. And it's good to try and keep an optimistic attitude and know that most probably you will come out the other side in a positive way, especially because you are thinking and realizing and learning as you go, because I think we are here. As long as we're thinking about music from the 60s, like Joni Mitchell says, life is for learning. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So this brings us to text 5, which is so appropriate to our conversation. Psalm 90, it's a plea to God for guidance to live life well. We need God's guidance in order to live an ethical life. And I think also in order to learn what we're here to learn, in order to advance through our lives with an attitude that makes even adversity a catalyst for positive things. So the text is not clear. It wasn't clear to me at first. Teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. I read that and I didn't realize it was guidance until I thought about it more. So like, as our time is limited, we should live our lives with a sense of purpose and priority. That's how it relates to order. And one thing to ask your participants, do you feel you're able to prioritize things in your life in a way that adds wisdom and meaning to your interactions with others and to your accomplishments? I'm not going to say even to your challenges in the world. And that's a yes or no kind of answer, but I think it's also sort of a challenge. Like, how would you prioritize things in your life in order to help you deal with um, and add meaning to your interactions and your accomplishments and your challenges? And that really is kind of the essence of order, to sit down and prioritize, because it's really priorities in the end that matter, I think, because we do have a set amount of time. So, and then the next question to ask your participants, you feel that you've been able to live life according to your priorities? And do you see the priorities changing as you reach different stages of your life?
Yeah.
So in answering this question for myself, and then I hope you will too, I think your priorities do change as life goes on. And also as I look back on my life and I see what I've accomplished and what I haven't accomplished, I realize that I was setting priorities. Even if I didn't know I was setting priorities, I was setting priorities. And the things I prioritized, I'm happy to say, are good. Sometimes things force you to prioritize. I had a really challenging, my third kid was really challenging. And I think we've come out the other side after a lot of years of challenge. And I think that maybe she forced herself to become a priority by being the way she was, but I'm so glad that she was. I feel like I've learned so much from it and that she's brought so much richness to our lives. So I think that when you're in the middle of something, you might not know, but but you make your priorities and then you look back and you say, oh, okay. I didn't prioritize my retirement, but I prioritized my family, or whatever it is you're doing. And then you can reprioritize, and you can feel good about your accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
So an interesting conversation. How would you answer the question?
Well, I think that, I think it is important to create priorities, but you also have to have some flexibility in looking at life circumstances that may dictate you to rethink about your priorities. Sometimes it takes tragedy in order for you to be able to take a look at a priority that you may not have thought was a priority until you have something, tragic happen to kind of set you straight and kind of reorder, what truly are your important priorities.
Right. And I think that's a really important part of Seder, of order, to prioritize so that you can live your life in a way that's meaningful for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to some great practices. Okay, here's an activity. Visualize a pearl necklace that Rabbi Wolbe describes in text 2. Then journal about your potential, talents, character traits, and virtues, and how the lack of Seder in your life might interfere with their full expression. What I like to do for this idea, have each participant make a list of their top 8 to 10 talents, character traits, virtues, things that are positive about themselves, on index cards, one on each card. Then ask them to order the cards as if they were pearls on a string. How would they arrange their pearl necklace? And then how would they describe their clasp? That's a good activity to do after the first or the second text, so they can really visualize and understand what that, my favorite text, is about.
Okay, actually.
Yeah, you try it with your group. I think you'll like it. Let me know how it goes.
Okay.
Now there's another one. Create a new structure in your life this week, whether it's a daily meditation, prayer, or journaling practice. If your life is already overstructured, honor the structures you have in your life and think about what might need to be released to leave time for something else that has been unattended to. And this is a good suggestion for cultivating the midah. I think it's also a good time to see how your participants feel about the structure in their lives. Ask them to focus on the last part of this practice. Meditate on what you might need to be released. And ask them to see what kinds of activities have been left out due to the structure that's inherent in their lives. Also, see which structure in their lives provides the most security and comfort. I think that we tend to not realize that security comes also from order. We can see how it could be rigid or it could be too confining, but I think in certain ways it can also provide security. And I think that's important. Rabbi Wolbe suggested creating a daily and weekly order that will include enough sleep, enough time for exercise, enough time for regular and healthy meals, enough social time, enough time for study, and enough time for spiritual practice. If it's not yet a regular practice, he suggests putting Shabbat into the schedule. So, then that's really helpful because that can provide some of the time we need just to relax. And I don't know if you did equanimity, if anybody began a regular practice of Shabbat after the last session, but if they did, they can kind of share what it's done for them. And I think also it's interesting to discuss how you celebrate Shabbat. There's traditional, and then there's just the core value of it, spending time with friends and family and not working. So it's interesting. There's a lot of things you can do, but that might be an interesting thing to talk about. And then think about the order of creation that's outlined in Genesis. What might God's creative process of making order out of chaos model for you in your own life? I think it's also significant to point out that Genesis tells about God creating order out of chaos. So I see God as kind of the order in the universe, like the rules that order all physical things and maybe spiritual things as well. We just don't know how to measure it. But it's interesting to get that discussion into your discussion of order. And then you probably know about this. So
that looks like one of my clients.
Right. So one of the nice things you can do for social action is make order out of something. They could do somebody can do it at home, but if the synagogue has a thing that needs to be ordered or straightened out, photographs, drawers, closet space, tidying up loose ends, it can even be it's tax time, all those things. But you might plan a rummage sale, like maybe people clean out their closets and you can do a rummage sale as part of this activity. This picture here, I'm sure you know this book by Marie Kondo. Actually, Marie Kondo on the floor here. She has a TV show now also.
Yep.
The life-changing magic of tidying up. So that might be a nice thing to bring in because it's the same basic stuff as the Mussar masters, but it's not Jewish and it's modern. So it's kind of an interesting support for what our tradition teaches. Might be interesting to compare. So when I send my follow-up email, I'll mention the book so that you probably know it anyway, but you might.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we have some interesting additional information. Some of the items on this list suggest ways to bring order into your physical world, and some suggest ways to bring your spiritual life into order. This is interesting. So review the steps of the Passover Seder at the front of the Passover Haggadah, or you can look at them here, and just think if you were a Martian who had never been in a Passover Seder, would you understand from the order of these steps what the Seder is about? And that can be kind of a parallel to understanding how order structures our lives and helps us prioritize and figure out what our lives are about. Then there's a link here to different quotes. Now, not all 50 things on this list will be pertinent to you, but you can take a look and see which ones would be useful to help put your life in order. So my favorite one is 3 Rules of Work from Albert Einstein. Out of clutter, find simplicity. From discord, find harmony. And in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. So that was a really good one.
Yeah.
You'll find other ones at that same link. And I'll send out a PDF of these slides so you can just click on these links if you want to look at any of them.
Okay.
The good TED Talk, how complexity leads to simplicity. So I watched this, and you have to really have your mind ready to think. he talks about how he's not overwhelmed when faced with complex systems. I felt a little overwhelmed listening to him talk about his complex systems. You can think about it and see how it, how you feel. How to clear clutter with a clutter maven. That's a nice little video. She pledges to deliver viable solutions, which you probably do too, for an overstuffed home or work environment, aiming to clear the space necessary to operate in a healthy, peaceful, and inspirational space. Then there's the Passover Seder, since it's coming up, just a review of my Jewish learning. Then there's some great quotes for organizing your life with meaning, but it's compiled by Good Life Organizing. So I've included the one on the screen as my favorite from the group. I like it because it focuses on the connection between physical clutter and spiritual clarity. Curious to see what you think. Eliminate physical clutter. More importantly, eliminate spiritual clutter. And that talks about the relationship between the two. It's interesting because I'm also doing this from home. My home is very organized. I actually live on a sailboat. It's really organized, not cluttered. Moved from a 5-bedroom house when my kids grew up. But my office, not so. Like my
You always have one place within your abode that you have to have it to where chaos is okay.
Right. So it's an interesting thing, especially from your perspective, but also when you discuss with your participants, like, why do you need that one cluttered space? And what's the effect? And, I really wish all of my space, when I get down to work and I'm looking for something, it would be nice if it was there. Even on my computer, I do a find every time I'm looking for a file. So it would be very interesting to talk about that with your participants and see what makes us do that. Or maybe, I don't know. Yeah. And then in the back of our source book, there were always questions on the back to help us focus on independent projects. I don't know where your group is in terms of those, and they're pretty fluid, because they're independent. But it's nice to have some questions on the back to help them focus on what they're doing. So you can either have everybody write on the back of their books in those lines, or you can discuss it, or both, depending what you like to do. But the ones that pertain to this topic, which of your independent projects has the most impact on your physical or spiritual freedom, and how? Because we're thinking about freedom when Passover comes, but also because we're thinking about the freedom that can come from structure. And which of your independent projects most effectively renews and refreshes your spirit? Questions. So we're thinking about how structure provides us with freedom, and how each person's independent project impacts on their freedom, both spiritual and physical. And that is our webinar. I'm really glad that you joined. Anything you want to add, or?
No, I think it was very helpful, very interesting, getting your perspective on the text. I did review everything, but yeah, this is something that I gravitate towards. So it'll be interesting. I think it'll be an interesting topic for our group, because we have a lot of people that I think that it'll really make them think about order in a different way other than just the Passover Seder.
Right. It's going to be interesting to see what your conversation is. And if you have time, if you want to, share with me what happens, because I'm interested.
Sure. You had mentioned something about an inspirational Facebook Facebook page that you have.
Yes, it's a Chai Mitzvah Inspirational Facebook group. It's a private group you join, and I will definitely send you a link.
Okay.
Email, and all you have to do is click that you want to join, and then we'll just click.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just look for your email, and I'll let you know how things go. Now, we actually had our first. We had a slow start in getting our Har Mitzvah program started, but we finally had our first one in February.